So welcome to Think It, Dream It, Do It, post-high school options for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is part one of a two-part series. Tonight, we are focusing on community-based employment stories. Go ahead and switch us to the next slide, please, Jamie. Okay. Before we go any further, I wanted to share information about two more workshop opportunities. Part two of this series will be looking at post-secondary educational opportunities. That'll happen on the 21st. And then on Monday, we have a transition mini conference. You can see the different sessions. You can register for both of these workshops at the link I've included. And for the mini conference, you register once and you can attend however many sessions interest you. So just an FYI. Okay, Jamie, I'm ready for my last slide. So we put this workshop together, Larissa and I and some of our other colleagues, because we wanted to support the employment dreams of young adults and their families, to provide a foundation for them to think about what employment could look like. And that's, to me, why it's so exciting to see how many folks are supporting transition-aged youth. So we have a great agenda. Larissa Beck with Reach for Resources will be exploring community-based employment. And I am so excited to welcome a panel of experts who will be sharing their own journeys to employment. So stand by while we get Larissa's PowerPoint up and mine down. And while that's happening, I will tell you a little bit more about Larissa. Larissa Beck's been part of Reach for Resources since 2009. She started as a community living specialist after earning her master's degree in ethnic studies from Minnesota State University at Mankato. While she was in college, she developed a passion for working with folks with disabilities while volunteering for Special Olympics. She's held many different positions at Reach for Resources, including directing the community living department, where she oversees in-home services, employment support services, and housing services. Larissa is ACRE certified in employment services for people with disabilities, and she's also involved in the Association of Residential Resources in Minnesota's Service Innovation Committee. That is a mouthful, Larissa. She serves on the board of the Minnesota chapter of the Association of People Supporting Employment First, as well as the National Board of Directors for APSE. She was also appointed to and has served on Minnesota's task force to eliminate sub-minimum wages for the past 2 years. And when we get to the panelist presentation, I believe they will be introducing themselves. And our panelists tonight are Dupree Edwards, AJ Woodson, and Josh Brady and his mom. All right, Larissa.
All right.
Thanks again, everyone.
My screen's up and everybody can see it?
Yep.
Awesome. Like Sue said, I'm Larissa Beck. She said I did a lot of things, and I suppose that there's a lot of things that I'm involved in and have been involved in over the years. So this is me. My information is here, and I believe you guys have all of the slides to be able to have my contact information on it with my email address and phone number. And so I will be chatting with you here tonight about this. Originally, I was supposed to be able to do this with Brian Bajan from ICI University of Minnesota, but he was invited to be involved with some fancy dancy conference tonight and this week. So he's there and left me here, which is just fine. But I'm excited to be able to share all this info with you guys. So the goal of this is to be able to talk about and to discuss competitive integrated employment and community life engagement. These two things are really meant and designed to be able to work together and in coordination with one another. The goal of employment is really just to have people be involved in their communities and have good supports built around them and be doing things that they want to be able to participate in. And so sometimes that might mean somebody's working a job full time. Sometimes that might mean that a person is working and also attending a day program in addition to that. So the service system that we have allows for all of those different options to be able to exist for people. So where to begin with the process with VRS? So each school, each transition program has a VRS counselor, vocational rehabilitation services counselor, assigned to each school, each transition program. And so if you need help finding who that VRS counselor is for your transition program or for your school, I've got the link there to be able to find that information. But realistically, the goal is to be able to learn more about VRS as a system and what they're there to be able to do for each person, discuss different options that exist within the VRS funding system, and apply for that service as needed and as desired. So the VRS counselor at the school, at the transition program, should be able to help walk you guys through that process of what that really is and looks like and how that needs to be done. Because there's very much a sequence of how to access these kinds of services, and they can help to be able to walk through that. So VRS provides a service called PREETS, or Pre-Employment Transition Services, which is another mouthful. And that is meant and designed for people through the ages of 14 to 21. So this is really meant to be done in high school, in transition. And it's meant and designed to do job exploration and counseling and really help people to kind of figure out what are some of the things that I might like to do and what are the things that exist and that are out there in the world that I could even do. A lot of times there's people with disabilities who think of some specific jobs in 4 different areas that are what we as people with in services think of for people with disabilities. And it's food, filth, fetching, and oh man, can't ever remember the 4th one. Sue was saying it.
Filing.
That's a good one. Yes. So those 4 jobs are things that we think of for people, but we don't necessarily think of this as everything that a person could be good at and what people enjoy and what people's passions are and what they're skilled at and what connections we might have within our families, within our own social networks, and how can then we help to be able to form and help to be able to give different ideas of what different jobs and what things could be for people. Work-based learning. We know that you get experiences by what it is that you're in and what it is that you're doing. So there's a lot of jobs that can be done, and you can coordinate that with your VR or with your transition program and do those things in coordination with one another. Counseling on post-secondary education options. So your VRS counselor at the school or somebody who's doing PREETS with you, if you're working with a different contracted agency that does PREETS services, because sometimes it'll be a VRS counselor that you're doing with, and other times it might be an organization like Reach for Resources, an organization that I'm at. We contract with VR to be able to do those services with people. So it could be either or. And they are there to be able to help you walk through what those options might be and what that education for post-secondary might look like, and help to be able to figure out what is that going to cost? What are some different scholarship options that might be available? What is the living situation going to look like? Where are you going to eat? Are you going to eat in the caf at the school, or are you going to eat your meals in your own room back in your dorms? So, they can walk through kind of what all that is and what that would look like. Workplace readiness training. That's another specific service of PREETS. And they help to be able to figure out what are some of the things that you might need some help with in getting ready to be able to go in and working. And so some of that might be budgeting. Some of that might be self-advocacy building kinds of skills. Some of that might be resume putting together and interview skills. So there's a lot of things that can go into that workplace readiness training, and some of it might not necessarily seem as obvious of getting ready to get a job. Um, Instruction and self-advocacy. So that's another separate service. In addition, and that is another one that can be authorized through VR with their pre-ETS services. And it's really just helping somebody to be able to build those skills of self-advocacy and help them to be able to communicate what a person's needs and wants might be a little bit more. And having those conversations with staff, with family, with potential bosses, with coworkers, and whoever it is that might be that they need to be able to have conversations. So there's 3 different types of services, and where the funding comes for things is always going to be a little bit different. And this stuff matters when you're trying to be able to get in and applying for the correct services and just making sure that things are being done in the proper way and in the proper fashion. So within transition services, that transition services are funded by Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, and that is the payer for that transition program. If you are somebody who would be receiving those pre-ETS services that we just looked at, those pre-ETS, even though they're provided in a transition program, are going to be funded by VRS. And that is the Department of Employment and Economic Development, otherwise known as DEED. So just because you're in transition services also means that you can be receiving services then funded through MDE, Department of Education, and DEED with VRS. So it could be 2 separate funders. In addition, there's also waiver funded and county funded services. And those are funded through Department of Human Services, not resources. And so in all reality, somebody could be receiving services through all 3 of those separate funders. You could be receiving things with your transition program and doing that with the MDE funds, then VR, and have a waiver and receive funds and services through there. So 3 separate funders, 3 separate entities, people that you're dealing with and working with. And in all reality, the goal is to have this be a team of people that's built and made and developed around each person to help them really go through and develop what's going to be the best services, what are going to be the best things for each individual, and how to be able to have that all coordinate and work well together. And so this is something that is all being done as a part of E1MN, Employment First Minnesota. So it's these 3 entities that are working together to be able to have the system that works well for transition age youth, for adults who are receiving services, so that we can work to improve the system that we have and eventually help get more people into jobs in the community. So it's a lot of information and a lot of different funding, but that also means a lot of different paperwork and a lot of different approvals and a lot of different assessments that people need to go through for each of those different funders as well. So it can feel really overwhelming as you're rolling through this process, and just knowing that I think all of these are funded through different things really helps to be able to make that make sense in my head, knowing that you have to do these things for each of those entities. And the goal would be for having them to be able to communicate those things with one another. However, since they're all funded by different things, they all have their different assessments, they all have their different tools that they use. And unfortunately, the world's just not that great yet. Someday, I hope it could be, but we are not there at this point of time. And so this is what we have. So it is working with each of those 3 separate funders and working within the systems that they have. So for those long-term employment services, those are typically going to be funded through those county funded or waiver funded services. And we have 3 panelists here who all are in jobs in the community who are receiving those long-term services and supports. And so those are typically going to be funded through those waiver funded programs or county funded programs. And so that is where you would go to your local county to be able to be assessed for those services and have that all get approved, working with your case manager with DHS And so that could be a county case manager that you have that actually works for that specific county, or it could be a contracted case manager that you're working with that could be from a Thomas Allen, a Meridian, a Pinnacle, Reach for Resources. There's a lot of different agencies that do contracted case management service. So they go through and do a min choices assessment with each person. And that is a big, long assessment that you have to go through and answer lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different kinds of questions. But that's essentially what determines a person's budget for their waiver. And so once that is, and what services a person would be eligible for. And so once that's developed, then you work with your case manager to figure out what are the right services for that person to be involved. So the role of the case manager then is to be able to access and navigate those social, health, educational, vocational, and other community and natural supports for a person. And all of this is supposed to be based upon a person's values, strengths, goals, and needs. And that's where that min choices assessment really comes in, because that's what that assessment goes through and helps us to be able to identify for each person. And so they're responsible to provide the necessary information to help folks make informed choices. An informed choice is really being able to explain what each of those different services what that looks like, provide some examples of what that could be, and not necessarily just say, here's this, this, and this. You can do a DT&H service, you can do employment services, or you can just do this on your own. Like, it's really meant to help somebody get a picture in their head of what this could look like and what that could be for them. And so there's been a lot of additional training around employment services that have been brought forth over the course, actually it just started in February, with case managers to really help them be able to have the tools to help folks make those better informed choices. So that their role is just to be kind of that like connector and help you to get connected to some of those different service providers. And whether that's going to be through VR or through those county waiver funded services, that's their role, is to help connect to those things.
Larissa, we've had a couple of questions.
Sure.
And just a comment, there's at least one person participating tonight who has a young adult who's 34. So I think you're going to talk about VRS in this slide beyond just pre-ETS. But the two questions are there limits on what employment services the county or waiver can fund while the student is still enrolled in school? Is the first question.
So if a person is still in school, the funding for the long-term services and supports can either come from the waiver funded services. It can also sometimes come through VR. So this is where things get to be a little bit murky and a little bit confusing and hard sometimes for us to be able to navigate and answer well. As to limits, for the waiver funded services, there's not a time limit that's associated with it. For the VR, there can be a limit that's associated with it. That's a time limit. And it depends upon which programs you're in. So that makes it hard for me to be able to answer like succinctly. So just know, yes, maybe for the time limitedness for VR. And then long-term for waiver county funded services, there's no time limits that's associated with that. As for hours limits, like hours per week that would be needed and necessary for somebody to receive those services, VR, probably a little bit lower of an amount just because of how that system works and is functions. For waiver funded services, county funded services, it's typically going to be a little bit higher of a allocated amount that you're able to do on a regular basis. But it's dependent upon each person's need. And in all reality, once somebody has a job in the community, the goal is for it to be a fading support service. And so, and we'll touch on this a little bit more as well, but it's really meant to help somebody get involved and set up with natural supports that are at that job, that are at that site, so that it isn't the person relying on the employment specialist to be there and be with them the entire time. So that's a shortish answer.
Does Minnesota have managed care? If so, how does that intertwine with the various service organizations?
So we have managed care for elderly waiver services. We do not do that for our waiver funded services.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So wouldn't apply holistically. So VRS, what is it? Vocational rehabilitation services. Realistically, the goal of VR is with the right training, preparation, workplace accommodations, people with disabilities can have rewarding careers. So VRS unit is there and designed to help people prepare for, find, and keep a job and live as independently as possible. VRS has like a menu of a slew of a bunch of different services that exist. And it's really just based upon what a person's needing, wanting, and what is going to be the most beneficial, helpful at whatever point of time for somebody. They meet and check in with folks on a regular basis. Your VRS counselor typically is meeting with you every single month. And so they do a good job of trying to be able to really evaluate and figure out what's going to be the right fit for the right person at the right time. How to be able to qualify for it? You need to be on an IEP or have a 504 plan or have a documented disability. And so that would be disability on the basis of Social Security or through what's known as a SMRT through the state medical review team. And that's typically done at that county level. And who is it for? It is for students in high school and transition programs. It's also for adults as well. So it's not just students and transition age youth. It is a program that is designed and meant to work with adults as well. So, and again, it goes back to that menu of services, and that is what the VRS counselor is designed to then help figure out what is needed for the right person at the right time.
Okay, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Before we get to the panel. Is a Transition Plus program through the high school 18 to 22 considered still in high school? Can they utilize both in-school VR and through the waiver?
They can utilize both services, yes. And with, I wish that I had this slide in here. There's an E1MN slide that I like to be able to have and to show. And maybe I can, in the background, find it and pull it up in here as you guys are answering and going through some of these questions. But it really does go through that path of when people would qualify for what services. And for youth and transition age youth, it's one thing. For adults, it's different. And it's where the funding is coming from in all reality, and at what points of time you need to involve those different systems. So we didn't want to spend a ton of time on like which programs and which funding at what points, but just knowing that there's 4 different stages of employment services within Minnesota, and those are engage, plan, find, and keep. And so for waiver county funded people, for adults, or for adults, not waiver county, but engage and plan are funded through the waiver, find is funded through VR, and then keep is going back over to the waiver for funding there. For transition age, it is a little bit more murky because more things are funded through VR that way. And so it is engage, plan, and find are all funded through VR. And then keep can be funded through VR or it can be funded through the waiver. So confusing.
It is. One more question before we embrace the panelists. How do we figure out if it is VRS or DEED or waiver funded for high school students?
So the first thing that I would guess go to is if there's a case manager involved, you're going to have a county or waiver funded service. And so if you're working with a case manager, typically there's going to be waiver county fund things involved. If you're not working with a case manager, it's going to be through VR. That's the simplest answer that I think I can give for that.
Okay. And I think, Larissa, part of why some of this figuring out the funding sources is so murky is it's relatively new, is it not, to Minnesota? Yeah. And we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah. So this system that we have of E1MN has been around since 2018. And there's just some things that go along with it. And it's because of VR needs to be the payer of last resort. And so that's why this exists of needing to be able to go between those different funders for these different programs. And if you're working with good service providers, if you're working with good VR counselors, if you're working with good case managers, they're going to know how to do this and how to be able to operate this. And so I said that there was additional training that had come out in February for case managers. That's a lot of what this goes over and goes through and helps to direct case managers of how to be able to access these services, who to go to at the right time. And realistically, there's not meant and designed to be any wrong door that you go to. One, if you're not set up with the right entity, they should be able to send you and give you the name and information for the right person to be able to have that conversation. And VR can point you to deep to county waiver, VR, and back and forth. So it's really meant to be a fluid system that we're all working in between.
Okay, sorry, one more question, Larissa.
Yeah.
Because this is one that I hear from parents somewhat frequently. If your county has a shortage of job coaches, can parents be the job coach if they get a job?
Depends. If you are on a waiver or county funded services, so there is an option for what's known as CDCS, Consumer Directed. Oh, man, I always forget this acronym.
Community supports,
Community,
consumer directed community supports.
I think, yes. And that is really the funding source that you need to have set up to be able to pay a parent or a family member or somebody to be a job coach for somebody. If you're utilizing a traditional waiver, then you would need to get hired on by that organization or service provider to do so. And I will say that there, as a service provider, as a manager, supervisor in that, it's a lot of training. It's a lot of stuff that's required for us to do that for folks. So it's not just a like, oh, I'll just do it and be that person's job coach. There's a lot involved. And it takes a lot to be able to do that. So I would push a little bit and try to be able to get some staffing in place or work with your community that you have if there's somebody else that might be a good fit to be a staff person for your child. It's a lot to be a person, to be your son or daughter's family member's job coach. Not that it can't work, but it's hard. Through VR, you'd have to be a VR counselor, and they have some pretty high standards as well, and you would need to be hired on by them. And then if it's a contracted provider with VR, then you would need to, again, get hired on by that contracted provider. So, yes, but.
I think it's certainly worth a conversation, Larissa, with
Sure.
VRS and county case manager, because I just think about rural parts of the state where there truly are no job coaches. So I recommend, excuse me, just talking with the folks who are supporting your young adult and see what options are available for you.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always worth a conversation, that's for sure. And different service providers have different things that are built and set up around there. I certainly have feelings about it, and I've had it work really, really well with some family members. I've also had it work horribly with others. So it's going to be based upon each provider's experiences that they've had too. And, it's not meant, if I'm doing it and having a hard time with it, it's not a personal thing. It's more just like, this is the experience that I've had with it, and I have a hard time doing it. So,
okay, thank you, Larissa. Let's move on to the panel.
yeah. So, we have 3 people here as a part of our panel tonight. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves and kind of do a little bit of do that way, or have me? Okay, so Dupree Edwards is our first panelist person. Dupree is working at ICI Minnesota. Also, aren't you working someplace else too, Dupree?
Yeah, upstream arts.
That's what I thought.
Mhm.
And Dupree is a rapper extraordinaire. And you can find some of his videos and some of the stuff that he's done, and it's really fun to watch. But he's awesome. AJ Woodson is working at Allianz and has worked there for, I forget how long, AJ.
14 years.
Oh.
So a short period of time. And AJ's a part of the Minnesota APSI board as well. And then we also have Kathy and Josh Brady. Josh works at Pizza Hut and has worked there for 3 years.
Like 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. And Josh is one of the people that my organization works with and has had a job there with his job coach. So first question that we have as the panel is, what convinced you that you could work? And so I think it might be best if we just start with one person and then we'll kind of just go through. So let's start here with Kathy and Josh, since you guys are unmuted.
Okay. So do you know what convinced you that you wanted to work?
Yeah,
Why did you want to get a job?
'cause I want to save my money.
Where do you like to go?
Illinois.
Josh wanted to earn money to go to Illinois to visit his grandparents. And so a way to do that was to work. And we've always been really strong in volunteering. And once Josh kind of aged out of transition and moved into day programs, we started exploring what his future would be.
Were there people that helped to be able to convince you? Teachers, advisors, parents, friends, VR counselors, other folk?
Is there somebody that convinced you that you wanted to work?
With teachers.
Teachers. I think like we've been very lucky where we've been surrounded, especially during school, during Josh's educational career, that, there was no glass ceiling. We could just do and be anything that we wanted to. He's showed an incredible amount of perseverance, and we've just kind of held on to that. We didn't hit the roadblocks until after we got out of the educational environment.
We'll hit on some of those things.
Yeah.
All right. So Dupree, what convinced you that you could work?
Oh, wow. Actually, matter of fact, I guess making money, like when I was in school, I didn't really care about making money at all. I did a lot of things, volunteer, I had a good heart and everything. So that's what kind of really convinced me to actually really have a job, is I could be able to get things and everything like that. That's what motivated me, convinced me to do a lot of good things. And yeah.
Awesome. Were there people that helped to be able to convince you, or like folks that were involved that were really pivotal in helping you to make that choice?
Yeah, I had a good support team back in the day, good IEP team. Teachers kind of, believed in me, at T plus, and yeah, but I have my own plans actually, but a lot of people did convince me, teachers, my support team. Yep.
AJ,
Yes.
what convinced you that you could work?
I didn't really have a choice not to work. because either I go to work or go to college or get kicked out of the house.
Okay. Were there people that were involved with you that helped to like point you in the right direction or like helped make a difference in that with you?
Teachers, friends, and I mean, some counselors, but mostly my teachers.
I like hearing that. That's for sure. All right. So I think we're just going to go back and start with Kathy and Josh. Sound good? So how did you make this happen? And what was the process like for you guys? And I've got some other questions up here of what was the referral process for service providers, what services were used, who helped to be able to make that happen, and then just some examples of some hypothetical people.
Sure. Yeah. So the referral process for us was we went through state services for the blind. It was kind of just like a check-in, really. And they had asked, or I think we mentioned that we were looking for work. And he was the one who kind of started that ball rolling. We got in touch with a job coach who went out and kind of interviewed Josh, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. What did Jamie do with you? Do you remember?
Jamie worked on chicken nuggets,
Oh, yeah.
chicken wings,
Yeah, that's what you do now.
pizza boxes.
Yeah. We Jamie, like she got to know Josh a little bit about what his interests were, his temperament, all that good stuff. And then basically went around to local companies and to find out what their pain points were, and if it was a good fit for Josh to come in and kind of help them with that. And that's how we found Pizza Hut.
So I'm gonna just hold on a second with that and
Yeah.
describe a little bit more. So what you're talking about is known as customized employment and job
Yes.
partnering. And so there's a lot of different organizations who do this type of work of customized employment. And when you're working with a VR counselor to be able to do that, you need to be ACRE certified to do so. And so that is training that's done with Mark Golden Associates, or VR Customized Employment has its own training program that exists. Or then Griffin and Hannes is another program that is ACRE accredited. So the staff then that you're working with has been trained in how to be able to do this, how to be able to go and have conversations with different employers and help them to then figure out and have those conversations with them, different employers in the community, to then really figure out what are some of those things that the businesses could benefit from, and how can we then work with this person to be able to help create a job, create a role that's going to be mutually beneficial to everybody involved. And so the role that Josh has is a role that was specifically created for him and help him to be able to get that job experience. It was a need that Pizza Hut had, and that's really what is moving this all. So just wanted to touch on that because it is a specific service and a specific thing, and a little bit more, it's more specialized. So all right, Dupree, you are up next. So
Uh,
how'd you make it happen?
yeah, well, like I tell this story before, I did a very big tours of a lot of different day programs. But I went through opportunity partners and take this eval that helps you test what type of skills you have in some type of things. And they wrote evaluation, and I sent it to all the day programs that I was serving, so I could be out of or not go into shelter workshops or piecework and everything, however we want to say it. And the last program I toured, and the program that I'm in now, is Partnership Resources Incorporated. I went to this lady. She offered me like 3 jobs on the spot. Uh, and she called me back. She said, "Hey, would you want to work for this hair salon? This one lady's leaving." And I told her, "Yeah." Uh, got the interview, and rest was history. And my case manager, I picked that program, and that case manager, did that referral, and that became my day program for and job supported employment for 13 years now. So uh and uh and that's how I kind of make it happen too. So I kind of sum it up in all of these ways. And I guess just my team, the PRI gave me a lot of good things. And yeah. So I got right out of transition school at 21, T plus, and yeah. And I've been through a lot of process jobs, but my first job with PRI was the hair salon. That was it. So yeah, sorry about that. My voice is kind of crazy, so I'm trying to just bear with me. So yeah,
You're good. You're good.
yeah.
That time of year. All right, AJ, how
Yes.
did it happen? Was there what was the referral process for the service providers? What services did you use, and who helped?
Oh my goodness. That's a pretty long story, but um most part the service I use is LifeWorks, so mostly they help me find a job basically, and then they had a job for me. So then we got a perfect job for you. We go tour, took a tour of it, liked it, and then it was how you on. Give you a trial, I think like 30 days to try the job out. And then if you don't like it, you could go back. And then 30 days up, still worked there. I mean, then a couple of years after I was hired on as a employee of the company because I did such good work. I was a contractor at first, then they hired me on. And then ever since I've been there for 14 years, and mostly I did all myself after all my I don't really have any help except for LifeWorks. I mean, and my parents, of course. Can't forget my parents.
And if you're working with LifeWorks, there was a case manager that was involved that helped to be able to direct you there too, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So were you working with VR?
Mm-mm. I
No,
don't know.
or you're not sure? Okay.
I'm not sure.
So by you saying job trial though, that to me, that's again another one of those specific services that VR does. And so it makes me wonder and question if you were working with VR then to be able to do that, or if it might have just been part of LifeWorks' program that they do with Allianz. So I'm not 100% sure on that one, but because it could hypothetically have gone either way.
It could. That's mostly all my social worker does. She
Yeah.
handles all that paperwork.
Larissa, PRI did that with me too, a trial run. So
Trial run.
it's usually part of the day program. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it can be either way. And I am always going to, where's the money coming from and who's doing that and how's that working? That's where my brain goes with it. So. Then who are the people that you need to have involved gets to be the question that needs to be answered. All right. So Josh and Kathy, you guys are up again. So tell us about your job a little bit. I know we've talked about it some, but where are you working? And how do the services help you to be successful in your job? What services are being used? Are there PCA services? Is it an employment support staff that's there? And then accommodations that are being
PCA,
utilized.
Where do you work?
pizza. 'Cause I work at Pizza Hut.
What do you do there?
Hang out with friends, people at Pizza Hut.
What do you do at Pizza Hut?
Do chick do chicken wings at Pizza Hut.
Do you put them in bags?
I put chicken wings in bags.
Okay. So Josh does a lot of food prep for the busy weekend. So when do you work at Pizza Hut?
Thursdays and Fridays.
Yeah. Thursdays and Fridays from 1 to 4. And we have who's at we have Cynthia. She's your employment like job coach.
Good.
She's just kind of, we're working on having Josh be as independent as possible. So he uses a Lyft driver to use his Lyft to get to Pizza Hut from his day program. And then from Pizza Hut to home, he'll use another Lyft ride. And then his job coach they don't have a lot of braille, like Josh is he's kind of like he's a crew member that does a lot of, like I said, the prep work. So she'll bring the kind of the bins and everything to Josh, and then Josh will separate them. What do? You do chicken wings. What else do you
Chicken
do?
nuggets,
Chicken nuggets
French fries,
and French fries
and pizza sauce.
and pizza sauce. So Josh will kind of just portion control those for when Pizza Hut is busy.
And so just utilizing the employment support staff with Cynthia, then no other supports, no other services that are there. Any other
No.
accommodations or assistive technology or anything like
No.
that that's utilized?
Yeah, no, not for them. We're working on getting more like Braille there, so Josh can be able to identify the bins himself and bring them over to his workstation. So it's a process.
Awesome. Dupree,
Well, oh Lord.
tell us about your job. What do you do? Where are you working?
I work at Institute on Community Integration, ICI. I work as the DHS system change, technology, technical assistance. I work with positive behavior supports. I'm as a self advocate, a co-trainer with live experience. I've done a positive behavior support training with staff in 2015 and everything, so which is good. So I'm really knowing that. And I do have type of helps in meetings because sometimes it's hard to understand what they're talking about, things like that. So my job coach, helps me through the meetings and help me with that type of stuff. And but other than that, it's just something I've been doing and working hard, in self-advocacy and things like that. And I also work for this organization called Upstream Arts. I'm a teaching artist there. And I just teach their curriculum. And I also used to work in their office too, prepare the gear stuff a while back ago. And yeah, so I guess, I talk about the accommodations at ICI, just, at meetings and things like that. And I do have a job coach that checks in with me and everything. And yeah, so that's it.
Awesome. AJ, what do you do
Yes.
for your job?
I do many things. I work at Allianz. I'm mostly in the mirror room most of the day. I ship out supplies for our agents that are in the field. And then I started an employee resource group for people with disabilities, and which the company didn't have one. That's mostly what I do.
Um, and so what services do you have that you're set up with at your job?
I have a job coach, and that she comes checks on me once in a while, and then that's it. That's a job coach.
How often is she coming and working with you there?
She comes and checks me like for like 5 minutes, see what I'm doing, see how I'm doing, and then she goes back to help the other people that really need help with their job.
And then any other accommodations or assistive technology or anything that is set up for you to be able to be more successful in your job?
No, I learned more efficiently hands-on. I don't like it's just how I learn quickly when it's in front of me.
I like it. Can I just come back and ask you, Josh, how many, and Kathy, how many hours a week or how often is Cynthia there with you and doing?
She's there the whole time.
Okay, so the entire
Really
time that
doing-
Josh is there, and then
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
the whole time that Josh is there, then Cynthia's there working with him?
Right. She's not really working with him. She's doing her own things, computer work off to the side. But then when Josh needs like a bin of chicken nuggets, then she'll get that and bring that over to his workstation.
So, and part of the reason I asked the question is just to show the there's varying levels and it's based upon each person's individualized needs that they have and when they're working. So it very much might be needing the check-in kinds of stuff, or it might be somebody that's there the entire shift with a person. So. All right. So lessons learned. So what were some points of frustration with the services, with the system, with case managers, with whatever? What could have made things smoother? And what do you think that people in transition should know with that now? Or looking into these things for services, since we have somebody else who is, I think, 34. That's a part of this too.
Do you mind if I answer this one?
You answer the question.
Okay. So our points of frustration were when just really when Josh when he aged out and left transition and he was in day programs, a lot of the day programs, actually every day program that we had employment, like group employment that they offered. It was all custodial. So because of Josh's blindness, we were always told that it wasn't a good fit. So there weren't any options for us. And to be truthfully honest, we didn't know any better. So we didn't push. When we did talk to State Services for the Blind and they started helping us out, it was kind of a shock that Josh's day program didn't realize that you could work outside of the day program under Josh's waiver. So I think as far as like the third point of what do I think people in transition should know is, unfortunately, we don't know what we don't know. And it's just asking a lot of questions and knowing that, what you're looking for is possible. You just have to surround yourself with really knowledgeable people that will ask those questions and kind of help you advocate for yourself.
Awesome. I like it. Are there things that you think could have made that go better or work better looking back, or is it more just getting connected?
Yeah, I think it's knowing and it's not, we've been a part of several day programs, just trying to find one that is right for us and for our family. But I think it's just knowing that there are other options that are out there. And I think that sadly, a lot of people just don't know. And that's including, our folks at the day programs.
Yeah, very true. Dupree,
Um,
what were some points of frustration, some things that were hard and difficult?
well, you know, Uh, I guess what's kind of difficult is that I wish I would have had a little bit more options. I wish, back in those days, I wish I would have just, kind of really, if I knew my potential of what I'm really good at, because I really didn't know what I was getting into. So I was listening to everybody that I needed to go into a day program and needed to go to a job. But I wasn't thinking about like education or about other type of situations going on. And that's what I'm kind of frustrated about. I wish I would have went to college. I wish I would have went to explore and try to get something, a degree into something. And, at 34 years old, as I'm very, being successful at work, I really want to go back to school. I think those was my point of frustration. That I'm working on it, and I think I'll build my opportunity one day. Uh, what could have made things smoother? I guess just really listening, to my team, to my IEP team, about the strengths, because I felt like I was just very stubborn back in the day. I just didn't really care. I always think about myself. I was very short tempered, but I was always goal oriented and everything. So I guess just listening to people would have made a lot of things smoother, and I think a lot of things different about what I really wanted to do after I transitioned from Transition Plus. And what do I think people in transition should know? You know, don't always go to the day program. Really know your options. Advocate for yourself about what your strengths are. Where do you really want to go in your life? That's why we created this appointment first thing. So we can opportunities to get you to what your dream is, to what your skills are, to what your life you want to be independently. And I guess that's what the transition programs should really start to considering is the employment first. And I guarantee you, if they do it, that other people will get the opportunities to get the success that they deserve instead of just going straight into the day program. So that's just my thing that I think people in transition can really know about. So yeah.
Ooh, apparently my thing went away. That one. Sorry. Um, AJ,
Yes.
what were some points of frustration that you had?
Oh, my frustration was I when I came to Minneapolis, I was trying to find a job by myself out using the day program or transition school. And then I went to companies. I fill out I had a disability, didn't have a disability. Sis, none of them want to hire me. I was more than qualified. I don't know if they were fair that I had a disability, a missing limb, I couldn't do the job, or it's just frustrating employment right now.
What is something that you think could have made it smoother or easier?
I don't know. I mean, I guess what can make it smoother? I mean, it's just I think more companies, more education about people with disabilities. I mean, not all disabilities are missing limbs. Some disabilities are in the brain. It's invisible. You can't see it. I mean, it's just sad for people with all kinds of disabilities that are just treated different in this world.
And so if there's something that, what would you think that people in transition should know?
Just, uh, just be an advocate for yourself, and then just learn the history of disability. I mean, Senator Tom Harkins didn't make the American Disability Act so we could just not do what we want to do. He made it so we could have freedom. It's our freedom bill.
I like those answers. That's for sure. All right. And what would you say to people who think that work isn't for them? This is our last prompted question that we have for the evening. So,
I I think that Josh working has been fantastic for him and for our family. He's well known around the community and he's part of the community. And that's something that I think we were missing in being in the day program all the time. Um, it was just kind of isolating, you know? So being out there and really just giving back, you know, for a job well done has been great.
money doesn't hurt either. No offense to Illinois.
Yeah.
All right, Dupree.
Wow, that's a really good question. But I don't disagree with it. You know, I wouldn't tell people that didn't really want to work. You know, if you didn't want to work, you wouldn't be able to pay the bills. You wouldn't be able to get what you need to get. You got to make some type of living. You know, that's what, you know, my day program preaches to me a lot. Like you have to make a living to survive out there. You know, you have to be able to work and work. You can't just sit on this, you know, and not work because this disability community waiver service is not going to pay your bills. It's not going to give you good money. It's not going to give you any of those things. So you need to make the money to be able to work and to make a living because you're going to feel good about working. Maybe you don't want to get up and go to work, but you're going to feel good after you do it, and it's very rewarding. So that's a very tough statement that that maybe back in the day, Dupree, I would believe it, but this today, Dupree, I believe it's really good to work. So yeah, that's my thing.
AJ, what would you say
Oh,
to people who think that works for them?
that's tough. Just if you don't want to work, I mean, I go with the preset. I mean, I don't want to tell you have to work, but I mean, working is essential right now because groceries are high. Anything that you do is you pay more than you normally pay, and then if you don't want to work, I mean, look at different companies that are doing disability inclusion. Just look at them, see what they're doing, see if it's a fit for you. If they say they do this, if they say they're doing disability, ask them about it and see what they're really doing. That's, I mean, it's just working's all part of life right now. I want to be able to pay my bills and have fun.
I like it. Awesome. And then just other questions that we have for our panel and for people who are here. There was a question that came in, and maybe I can go through some of this one a little bit before we take some other questions, but describing barriers that you come across with available options in rural communities, available job supports. So, I mean, things are obviously a little bit different in greater Minnesota than it is within the metro area. That's for sure. But those areas and those parts of the state, there's people who have jobs and working and living in those places just as much as they are in the metro as well. And so I really do think that it comes down to being able to do those customized employment services and having conversations with those companies and with those businesses in those smaller, more rural communities. And there is, still access to transportation. It's a service that exists that is available to people who are receiving waiver or county funded services. And it certainly is something that takes a little bit more creativity. And certainly driving and getting around and transportation is always going to be a bigger, different thing than it is within the metro. I could certainly make an argument about traffic, and driving around in the metro as well is often a barrier and often a hindrance too. But I think it just requires a little bit more creativity sometimes, and knowing that community. And that is one of the benefits of some of those more rural communities, is there businesses that are more family owned and family operated. And it's not necessarily all of those big box stores that we're going in and trying to be able to get people jobs at. And quite honestly, that's where I honestly tell my job employment support staff, like, don't look at the big box stores. Those aren't going to be the places that we're going to be super successful in getting people jobs in, because there's more things to be able to work through and deal with HR. And different systems that are really meant and designed to help keep people out of those things. Whereas if we can go and have a conversation with a business owner or a manager, we can have a conversation about a Josh, a Dupree, an AJ, and talk to them about their skills and their passions and what they're good at and how they can help them to be able to increase whatever it is for their business. And so that's where, honestly, there are more successes. And there are these successes in greater Minnesota that are happening and going on every single day. So staffing is, for example, limited available providers. We run into support 2 check-ins per month. And so, I mean, that would be honestly going back and talking to that provider is what I would do. And just saying that you really would like to be able to have more support and more things that are there and built in. It also, like I said, goes back to need and what each person does need in their jobs. And the goal of employment support services is meant and designed to be a fading support. So if it's somebody who has a job in the community, what are the natural supports that can be set up? And that is a way to be able to work within the system a little bit to be able to make sure that people are getting the services and supports that they need to. So it might not necessarily always go back to a provider. It could be working with that company to be able to develop and put together the natural supports that might exist there too.
Larissa, this is Sue. I'd like to jump in with a thought. One of the workshops a colleague and I offered late last year, I think, was self-employment as an option for folks with disabilities who live in rural communities, because there are niches that can be filled. And there are lots of supports available for becoming self-employed. Voc Rehab can help with that. And there are other resources as well. We don't have a whole lot of questions. We have a couple, but Larissa, I've talked with families whose young people need personal care assistance during the day, which day programs are set up to provide. And they think about, how is this ever going to happen on a job in the community? Can you talk about utilizing a PCA at work and who pays for that? Because I think that's a question a lot of families and young adults have.
Yes. So I will say that those are employment support services, and PCA services are 2 very separate, very different things. And so this is certainly something that we run into, and I get asked about this often as well, because it isn't meant and designed for an employment support staff to be doing personal cares for people in jobs in the community. So it can be that you have a PCA and your employment support staff working with the same person at the same time. And so the PCA services would be set up with the case manager. PCA can be set up through your insurance as well, so through a medical provider. Most of the time it's going to be set up with your waiver county funded services that you would have. And you can have your PCA there, and they can be set up to be checking in on a however often basis as needed, required, necessary for the person for the PCA service, and then also receive the employment support service. I have seen too different things just kind of naturally shift and move over to some of those natural supports as well. And so it depends upon each individual person, what the needs are, how that's going to work out and be done. for everybody. But you know, that is certainly something that is able to be done, and that helps everybody out, right? And that's realistically kind of the goal, is to be able to rely on more of those natural support services for things that you need to, and then pull in those paid supports for when it's needed and necessary. So absolutely, you have the capability to utilize all of that. There were some changes that had gotten passed last year too, for somebody who was receiving services in a group home to also receive services at their employment, utilizing PCA. And that all got approved and taken care of last year. So that was an issue before, of somebody who was receiving and living in a group home wasn't able to also access PCA services in the community. But that's now been fixed. So. I see a question about how do you get to and from your jobs? And I know Josh had said for his, he gets to and from his job utilizing Lyft. And so there is a service that is just transportation that is funded through the waiver that, or county funded services that you can do. And so waiver can pay for somebody to utilize Uber or Lyft to be able to get to and from a job. It can also fund Metro Mobility that way too. So, but Dupree, AJ, how do you guys get to and from work?
Lyft, connectability, Lyft waiver. I also utilize Metro Mobility too, and I can utilize my staff because I'm in, individual home support, so I can use those stuff too. So yeah, but usually, yeah, we could talk about transportation another day, but mostly I use Lyft more than I use Metro Mobility. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
AJ, how do you get to and from work?
I use Lyft to connectability, and I use Metro Mobility when I'm going to when I go to places that are far. And then, I mean, the whole transportation is a whole story.
It all is. Kathy, did you have any? Kathy, Josh, did you have anything else you wanted to add to my description that I preemptively made for you?
No, that was good. We like Lyft, don't you?
I love Lyft.
Then to get to and from day program.
Oh, to and from his day program, they pick him up.
Okay, so the day program then is providing the transportation and then also receiving transportation through Lyft.
Right, correct.
And so just another point of confirmation. So both Dupree and AJ mentioned a service called Connectability. That is a specific service that's funded through the waiver or can be funded through county funded services as well. And so that is its own specific thing, and you get a certain dollar amount to use for transportation to use every month. And I know this about Josh, so hopefully I'm not saying anything I shouldn't be saying, but there's also transportation services that can be done through a service provider, and that can be done. And so you can, as a person, have transportation through a provider being done through Lyft, and also utilize connectability at the same time. So I have people that we're working with who utilize our transportation through Lyft to be able to get to and from work. And then they also use connectability to go out and about and do different things within the community that they want to go and do. So can be both. All right. Just looking to see if there's any other questions in here.
Larissa, we have a question from someone who would like you to talk a little bit more about the discovery process that BRS typically goes through to look at person-centered options for customized employment. Dupree talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, and so did Josh and Kathy. So discovery is a really cool thing. And this is where that ACRE certification and customized employment training really does come into play. There's a couple of different schools of thought of discovery-based services. And I won't get too crazy in the weeds about any of that because I can nerd about that for a long time. but it's really meant and designed to get to know a person, is realistically what it is at the end of the day. So it goes through and figures out who are the people that are important to you. How do they know you? What do they think of you? What do they think that you're skilled at? What do they think that are some of those emerging skills that you might have that you might not necessarily even know about yourself, but somebody else might be able to identify it for you. So it's a really thorough process that a provider will go through and help to be able to find out more about each individual person. They do different contact interviews with different people that the person is connected to, brings you out into different environments to be able to see how a person is interacting and how a person operates in places that they know really well, and also places that they don't know and have never been. And so we get to see then how a person is interacting and how they're operating in those two different kinds of places. And what are some of them the things that we need to keep in mind for them? Are there things that we need to pay attention with the environment or sounds or lots of people? Or can they do they like to be outside or inside? Or like what are the things that are playing into that? It goes through and does a thorough review of all of the different documentation about a person and reviewing the different assessments that people have been through and have had. And then the main goal of discovery is to develop some different themes of employment. And so these themes are really broad based, different thoughts in all reality. And so it's hard to sometimes describe what a theme might be for a person. And so if somebody's, into working outside, into doing things with their hands, into, that more tactile stuff, it might be a theme of outdoors. And so what are different jobs then that are addressed by outdoors? And so that could be, working in an agricultural kind of a site, could be doing a landscaping kinds of things. It could be working in a flower shop. It could be, working at a farm, working at a pumpkin patch. Like it can be a whole different slew of things. So the goal then for each theme is to develop a list of 20. And these are 20 different businesses that you know of in your area that then are connected to those themes. And then we go out and do different informational interviews with businesses that we're identifying within those different themes for a person. And so an informational interview is the person interviewing the company. It's not the other way around. And so it's really meant and designed to have them go and talk to that business about how'd they get into this? What is the education that was needed and necessary? What were some of the jobs that you had prior to this? What is the things that brought you to this to begin with? What do you like about it? What are some of the needs that you might have? What would you tell somebody who's looking to get into this field about it and how they should go about it? And so most businesses that we approach typically like talking about themselves. And so we don't normally have a huge issue with getting people to do informational interviews with us. Sometimes it's like describing the role or like figuring out who are the players and what's going on with this situation. And that really comes down to somebody, how they want to describe it and how they want to have these conversations with potential employers. And so it's up to them for what they want to disclose and what they don't want to about themselves. And so the goal of this all is to have them get interested, right? And so once you make those connection points, once you have those conversations, it's a lot easier then to think of, well, hey, Josh is really cool. He's really good at this, this, and this. I could really use him for these things at my business. There's a lot of commonalities here. He seems like a really cool guy that would do a really good job. And, I'd be more than happy to create something for him to do at my company. So that's kind of the goal of discovery. Is it's not necessarily just going through and looking at job ads through Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever. We certainly use those as tools of things that exist and what jobs are out there and what is possible to be able to get to that list of 20 or get different ideas flowing and moving for folks. But we don't use those for helping to find jobs.
Larissa, we have a question, a statement actually. We have VRS representatives turning people away due to their higher needs. These are individuals who have indicated they want to work. This is clear, but due to their higher needs, VRS is indicating they cannot support them finding a job and should be referred to E1 Minnesota, which is Employment First Minnesota. We struggle with this piece as well, as we see these folks as being in the fine stages, but VRS does not. And before you answer that question, Larissa, I would really like you, anonymous attendee, to reach out to me because my colleague and I at Pacer can help you with this. VRS should not be turning people away right now. All of their service categories are open. Thank you, Jamie, if you're putting my email address in. Larissa, what else would you like to add to that?
I was going to say just exactly that. The other thing that I would just add in to it is, has there been a plan stage done and completed for a person? Because in all reality, the goal of plan is to do that discovery-based work and really go through and figure out what a person would be good at and talented at, and then hand that off to VR for that find portion. And so that's the way that this is designed and put together, is to really get to know a person before we just start searching for jobs. And that has a lot better of success. So I would say too, going to your county and requesting those services would be the other choice and the other option, or asking that of VR as well. And VR has the capability to fund that service too. Either way.
So please reach out to me. And if anyone else who's participating tonight has questions, would like to be in touch with me, my email address is sue.fager, sue.fager @Pacer. We are always happy to talk with folks who have questions, so feel free to reach out to us. Thank you, Jamie. We have someone who has a question for the panelists. Did you have to ask for reasonable accommodations to help you do your job?
No, I think that was just, it's all part of Josh's employment program. So we didn't have to really go out there and ask for anything else. I mean, I think I find in our situation's a little bit different, but I think we find that, once people get to know Josh, they come up with some really great ideas of, hey, Josh, would you want to work over here? It's closer to everything. So I think, like, in our experience, we have just found more of a collaborative kind of communication where we didn't have to really go out and ask for some of those accommodations.
Bree or AJ?
Oh, no, I didn't have to ask for accommodations. If I needed it, they will provide it for me.
Yeah, just like I said earlier, just some things that, like somebody helping through meetings and things like that, but no reasonable accommodations, just help me stay on track. So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. One just resource around reasonable accommodations is JAN, the Job Accommodations Network. It's a great website, and they provide a lot of different examples of what reasonable accommodations are or have been. They describe really well how to be able to go through and request that, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. And yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tool. There's also a lot of stuff around assistive technology that's out there and exists. ARM, it's a provider trade association, has a technology resource center that they host on their website. And so if you just Google ARM Technology Resource Center, it'll pop right up, ARRM. And that's another like really good, helpful tool to just be able to see some different assistive technology that's out there, how it's utilized. They have some different videos of people utilizing assistive technology in the community, in their homes, and while they're working. It's just really cool stuff to be able to see. Well, so it's another thing I would highlight.
Larissa, we have another question for the panelists. How did they divulge their disability and what they needed, like extra breaks, level of support, or specific technology that they may need?
Good question. So I would say, again, kind of just goes back to each person and what they choose to divulge and what they don't choose to divulge. We have people that we're working with that have employment staff with them every single shift that they're working. And so it's very obvious that there's an employment support professional that they're attached to and going to and doing things with. There's other people who we work with as an agency that don't want their employer to know at all that they have employment staff or support staff that they work with. And so it can vary and range between that. And that's okay. And so there's some good information about like divulging and giving that information. Jan's website actually has a lot about that, of how to do that, when to do that, what are some good ways to be able to do that, and best methodology. And so I would really, really advise looking at Jan's website for some additional information and resources about it. But it's really what a person wants, and then having those accommodation requests kind of prepped and ready. And so as part of that discovery process that we were talking about, is one of the things that I didn't touch on, and I apologize that I didn't, but it's what are the conditions for success for a person who's working in a job, and really being able to go through and evaluate what those conditions for success would be for a person, and working then to make sure that that can happen with the job that they're hired for. And so that can be transportation, that can be lights in the site, that can be noise environment, that can be people that's around, like whatever those conditions for success are, is really something that should be done and evaluated within that plan phase through that discovery method. So we have a lot of different tools that we use, and some of them are, like your phone in reality, and setting reminders, setting timers, setting checklists. And those things are easy for people to do, and they always have them with them and always on them. Other people utilize different assistive technology and iPads and communication devices. And so it's a really broad range.
Well, it looks like we've answered questions folks had. Panelists, really appreciate your participation tonight. It was really wonderful to hear about your journeys and your experiences. Larissa, thank you as well. For folks who, let's see, Jamie, you have to help me remember this part. We'll send out a link tomorrow to our eval, that we would love to receive feedback from those of you who are participating tonight. And then you can let us know as well if you need a certificate of participation.
I believe that link will show up when you exit the webinar, to the link to the
okay.
evaluation.
Thank you.
And once completing that evaluation, there should be a link to the certificate.
Thank you, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And there's a question on the evaluation. If there are other topics that you would like to learn more about, please add them to that eval form. Thank you and good night, everyone.
All right,
Thanks
with
so
that,
much.
I will end tonight's webinar. Thank you, everybody.